Welcome to The Laws of Style, featuring conversations on creativity, fashion, and the law from the leading edge of our economy and culture. Hosted by noted fashion lawyer Douglas Hand.
On this episode, we have Steven Kolb, who is the CEO and president of the Council of Fashion Designers of America.
Everything we do is to help those designers, those members, in their businesses.
So you and I recently got back from a trip to China.
And we took a romantic rickshaw ride.
We're also recently coming off a successful, I thought, New York Fashion Week men's.
The narrative has unfortunately been about it's not significant enough because where's Ralph Lauren, where's Calvin Klein, where's Michael Kors, where's Tommy Hilfiger?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast, The Laws of Style. Downloaded to you from the offices of the law firm HBA, high above Bryant Park in the Fashion District of New York City. I'm your host, Douglas Hand, fashion lawyer, fashion law professor, and self-styled, well-dressed man. Today, on this episode, we have Steven Kolb, who is the CEO and president of the Council of Fashion Designers of America. Steven, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Doug.
So for our listeners who aren't familiar with the CFDA and what it does, tell us about it.
So the CFDA is the Council of Fashion Designers of America. We are the governing body of American fashion. It is a membership organization that has 500 or so designers, menswear, women's wear, accessory and jewelry designers who apply and are accepted into the organization. So we are organized to actually service those members. Everything we do is to help those designers, those members in their businesses. We also work with people outside of the organization, outside of the membership, industry friends and colleagues that might come from retail, editorial, manufacturing, but also have a stake in the success of American fashion. And it's our job to create a program to promote and help everyone do better.
Great. Well, so you and I recently got back from a trip to China, where we met with officials from the trademark office, court system, and other governmental officials. We were presenting a CFDA-produced report on U.S. designers who had issues with trademark pirates in China. And the goal was, of course, to educate and potentially influence some changes to the legal process in China. Our current administration and its current policy on trade with China made that a little bit more of an arduous task. A lot of the back and forth on that was happening as we were in flight, and when we landed, the positions coming from the Trump administration had changed pretty drastically. But I think upon our arrival in China and with the meetings that we had, we at least established an initial dialogue with those authorities, and I feel that that's always the first step to effecting some change. But I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the trip that we haven't shared.
Yeah, I think the trip we took to China was important in CFDA's work and how we work with our members. The idea actually to focus on trademark IP issues, challenges that American designers are having came from members of the CFDA, actually Mansour Graviel and Rebecca Minkoff, who independently were dealing with issues impacting their firms, and together came to CFDA and said, wouldn't there be some collective power if the organization grouped designers together and led an effort to try to create change in China? And so we took that on.
Just for our listeners, one of the issues with the Chinese system is that it's what's known as a first-to-file system for trademark, which means that anyone, even with no intent to use a name in commerce or actual use in commerce, can file for and register any trade name, which, contrasting that in the United States and many other systems, there has to be an intent to use that mark in commerce and then ultimately use in commerce before a application even registers. So it's very much like the U.S. regime with respect to domain names. That's the same regime that China has with respect to trademarks.
Yeah, and we do so much at CFDA supporting designers, young designers, promoting designers, that a lot of people are just trolling those programs and seeing someone who may have won a scholarship, who may have won a Young Talent Prize, and then registering those names. And so they're not even thinking, those designers aren't even thinking of doing business in China, and then when they're ready to go to China, they're confronted with the fact that they can't use their name. And so we reacted and took the initiative on and was able to work with you and your firm, Mark Reiner, your IP guy, who's been great to CFDA, and also some counsel in Asia that has experience around IP. And what we did was we looked at our membership, we went out to our membership, and we collected data to see exactly what that impact was. And it was significant enough to put into a report, and we shared that report with recommendations to Chinese officials on some steps that could be made to actually support American brands wanting to come to China. And you're right, when we got there, actually in one meeting, I guess that might have been with the trademark office, we were actually middle of the meeting, and it was the Americans on one side and the Chinese on the other side, and we were drinking nice Chinese tea.
The tea was great.
Very, very elegant tea, and just started the conversation, and someone came in the room and handed the head person a piece of paper, and everything stopped, more or less. And so timing couldn't have been worse, but what was successful about what we did is much like what we did years ago around IP and copyright protection laws in the United States. While we didn't get any laws passed or changed, we had heightened awareness and acknowledgement on a problem. And sometimes that's the first step, just creating a conversation or putting a spotlight on something. And I think we did that very successfully. Yeah. And the people we met with in China were Chinese lawyers, government officials, retailers. We had JD.com, Alibaba in the room, both gigantic global Chinese companies. And there was a real interest for them to engage in the conversation. While their hands with those people that we were meeting with might have been tied, there was an interest and a willingness to recognize the problem.
And a business logic, I think,
and the business logic.
For China and for Chinese citizens, both on the production side, right? Because American brands cannot produce in China under their own label if they don't have trademark rights. Moreover, Chinese consumers and that giant growing middle class that has a hunger for European and American luxury products, they also can't get authentic products in China because of the same problem. And so it really is a problem for the Chinese government to have to wrestle with. And I think we presented some potential solutions, as well as you said, put a real spotlight on the scope of the problem in a very objective way with that report.
And if you remember, we had a great lunch with many embassy representatives, IP people, assigned to China. We were in Beijing, to their embassies in Beijing. So we had the Germans there, the Italians there, the Brits there, the French there.
All eating Chinese food with that big Lazy Susan.
Yeah, all really interesting, kind of Lazy Susan style, which is very traditional. And that, to me, was one of the best meetings, because they were on the front line with this issue. And we had taken the lead in establishing this report. And the report's on CFDA.com. You can find it there. But we took the lead in establishing this report and actually provided a valuable resource and tool for them as a helpful way in their work in addressing the
Yeah,
issue.
and I'm hopeful that they adopt a similar format so that we can collectively go to the Chinese government with more data points from other jurisdictions. So
And we took a romantic rickshaw ride from the Forbidden City or the Old City or something.
Indeed,
It was
we
a
did.
long roundabout way to get where we wanted to go, but we got there.
we did, and the masks for that particular week with the extremely high pollution content
it
in
was
the air
bad.
were. But you look great in yours, I thought.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, so that's one way that the CFDA is helping membership. We're also recently coming off a successful, I thought, New York Fashion Week men's, and the CFDA has had a big role in producing that and creating a platform for that. Can you speak to that and its success and maybe some of the detractors' comments on it?
Sure. We just finished 7th season. And again, the reason we started Fashion Week for men here in the United States in New York was because our industry came to us. Historically, men's have shown during women's market, which is February and September. Women's weeks, February and September. The men's market's different, so they actually do market months earlier than women. So by showing in February and September, they've already done the commerce, so the show was an afterthought. So they wanted to align the show more closely with their market. So it was some of the top retailers like Bruce Pask at Bergdorf, designers like Todd Snyder, who felt like the strength of American fashion warranted its own week. So we pulled that off, and we had some great early founding partners like Amazon and Cadillac who came in and really helped us create a men's fashion week. And the idea was always to stamp it big, footprint it in the international calendar, and create a lot of energy around it. But we knew that that kind of production and the cost to do something like that isn't sustainable. So the strategy was always to begin to decentralize it and really let the city itself be the backdrop. And that's kind of where we are now in season 7. And the talent that we had just a couple weeks ago were incredible. You had Willie, who was just on your show and is one of the finalist representatives for the Woolmark Prize going to London, representing the U.S. in February of 2019. You had Emily Bodie, who's one of the 10 finalists for the very prestigious CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund, among others. And the critics will say the problem with New York Fashion Week is there are no big brands. Where is Marc Jacobs? Well, Marc Jacobs doesn't really have that much of a men's business, really, like maybe 3%, if any, at this point. Where's Ralph Lauren? Where's Calvin Klein? Where's Michael Kors? Where's Tommy Hilfiger? And at CFDA, we have a philosophy about Fashion Week and fashion shows, and it is brands should do what is best for them, for those brands. And Michael chooses to show his men's and women's together. Ralph likes Milan. And so the narrative has unfortunately been about it's not significant enough because those big guys haven't been there. And that's been unfortunate because that story has taken away from who is there. And you have people like David Hart, who's been consistent, Ovadi and Sons. You had a brand this year, Kenneth Nicholson, Neil, NIHL, one of the LVMH finalists, Robert Geller.
Always a favorite of mine.
You had so many young, and
I thought Carlos Campos as well had a really strong collection.
And so it's funny when you always say you don't want to read the reviews and what people say about you because you don't want to get bothered by it. And I always say that, but then I'm like frantically Googling to see what people say, and particularly Guy Trebeck, who is a writer for the New York Times and writes about men's and does men's reviews. And this season, Guy said, we had kind of come into our own. And I felt like the story had shifted from not who is showing, but who is showing. And so I felt really proud of the work and the content that came out of that and the opportunity that came out of that. And And so that's the Men's Fashion Week season 7, and next season will happen late January 2019, and then for the summer, instead of July, we're actually shifting to June, which is before Europe's, which is just another enhancement or a change to be even a little bit earlier to support the American designers.
So, Stephen, for our listeners who are not familiar with the seasonality of design and the timing of fashion weeks, can you provide some education there? I mean, why are we looking at lines so far in the future relative to when they'll be in stores?
Yeah, it's a favorite conversation for me to have. But basically, designers show 2 main collections a year. A more established designer might do 4, but let's just stay with 2 for a second. They show in February and they show in September. In September 18, which is coming up in 2 months, the designers will be showing clothes that are spring 19. So everything you see on the runway, for the most part in September, you can't even buy. And maybe even some of the stuff you see on the runway won't even be produced. You have to remember, a runway show is as much about sales as it is about marketing. So lots of times designers create show pieces that are really meant to create brand, DNA, or buzz. And so the buyer reacts, buyer buys, and then those clothes get delivered in the spring. In February, it's the same thing. You buy those clothes in September. And that's just always been the traditional market because it gives the designer enough time to produce. It gave the editorial teams time to identify product that they would run later in issues of the magazine closer to delivery. And that's just the way it was. And it actually made sense 30 years ago. Now it doesn't make as much sense for some because of the immediacy of how a fashion show is seen by an audience. So traditionally, you didn't really see those clothes until they came in
It was
September.
like a trade show, and only insiders went.
Only insider. Now through Instagram, well, first with the bloggers and internet, and now with Instagram and every other social channel, we're seeing that stuff so quickly. So there's some confusion, perhaps. Some people think that the consumer isn't sophisticated enough to know that those clothes aren't available. So some brands, Tommy Hilfiger being the biggest and the most successful, have stopped showing clothes that are for sale 6 months later during Fashion Week, and they've started to show clothes that are for sale now, often referred to as see now, buy now. And Tommy's done a great job on that. He has collaborated with Gigi Hadid, Lewis Hamilton, among others, and he's done these entertainment level shows. Think Victoria's Secret on the runway. And that way, he's taking advantage of his marketing spend to show to drive consumers into the store. And other brands are experimenting with that or doing that. Burberry has been one. Rebecca Minkoff has been another. Tom Ford did it once, and then he felt it was a great idea, but an idea not ready for its time, so he's reverted back.
Burberry as well.
Yeah, to the original concept. So there's a lot of different things happening during Fashion Week. Some brands, Alexander Wang being an example, have abandoned February and September and have put their collections on their main collections on their pre-collection schedule, which is December and June. So June, instead of showing in September, Alex actually showed his collection in June and combined it with his resort collection. And with that, and the advantage of that is he will deliver earlier than everybody else will deliver spring, who are showing in September. He's built in multiple drops, so he's not dropping it all at once, so there'll still be freshness in product. He will be in the store earlier, so the clothes will stay full price longer, which is definitely a plus for a designer. And he gets to take time off in August and kind of rejuvenate and refresh. So that's a new concept. Rosie Asvelin and Narciso Rodriguez are trying. So we are in a state of people, brands, designers, all doing different things. And one is not more relevant than the other. Again, it goes back to our philosophy. Brands should do what's best for them.
Right. Right. No, and certainly, from the editorial perspective, it's difficult for the editors to make all of those. It was more efficient for them to go to a round of shows at similar times of the year and get that content out. But there are so many more, if you include the blog sphere in the editorial process, there are so many more people that you still have interest generated by those more disparate shows.
Yeah.
So pivoting a little bit, so my book, The Laws of Style.
You wrote a book?
Well,
yes, of course I know your book. We did a talk about your book at Todd Snyder's store in Madison Square Park.
That's it. Indeed, we did, and it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and my publisher, the American Bar Association's website as well. But in that book, I elucidate a bunch of guidelines for men to dress in a manner that is capable and elegant because, at least for myself as a lawyer, I think that is the most effective way to dress. It's consistent with my practice as a lawyer as well as what I think clients want to see. In your role as a president and CEO of a global organization with board members like Diane von Furstenberg and Tommy Hilfiger and Ralph Lauren, who maybe have a more traditional view of what a president should look like, that is more skewed towards tailored clothing, but also acknowledging your other membership, American designers who have brands that have grown up in an era of casualization and wanting to to support all members. How do you go about presenting yourself, and is it somewhat chameleon-like depending upon who the audience is and what the day is?
Yeah, I think about it in the morning. What's my day and who I'm going to see? Sometimes it has to do with who that person is in terms of the hierarchy of fashion, and also my familiarity with what I think that person will be comfortable with or not. So if I can get away with not dressing up and I look at my day, I'm not going to dress up. Full disclosure, you're also the legal counsel for CFDA. So you come to CFDA board meetings and you see me in a suit and tie at a board meeting. I'm not going to go to a board meeting not wearing a suit and tie. I'm not going to go to a big pitch to a potential funder dressed like a casual, just off the street guy, right? But in my day-to-day, I tend to be less suited and kind of more casual. I think because I work in fashion, I have a greater opportunity or a license to do that than, say, people who don't work in fashion. For people, it's interesting. People who work in fashion, a lot of them don't really dress up. I mean, you look at a designer who comes at the end of their show and does their wave. Look at Pravo. It's always the white T-shirt and like a pair of jeans, right? I mean, designers tend to get uniforms. So I'll take advantage of that. Like today, I got up and we were we were interviewing the 10 finalists for CFDA Book Fashion Fund. So I'm on that panel. I'm one of the judges. And I was going to be with Diane, Ava Chen from Instagram, Andrew Rosen, Anna, Rupal from Saks, Mark Holgate, Jeffrey Kalinsky, Joseph Altazara, hopefully I didn't forget, Nicole Phelps from Vogue. And I thought, like, oh, I know all those people. I know how Andrew dresses. He's a casual guy. Mark doesn't dress. Jeffrey comes in T-shirts and cut off Gucci shorts. So I was like, all right, I'm cool today. Like, I don't have to do the suit today. But I always gauge it by who I'm going to be with and what is the intent of that meeting as well.
Well, so it's time for your 4 Ws. Each podcast, we ask our guests the 4 W questions about
all right.
what they're you're wearing. So starting with the what, I mean, just in terms of for the people not viewing on YouTube and simply listening, what are you wearing today?
I'm brand, is that what?
Well, that's the who.
That's the who. What I am wearing is a black shirt, a button-up shirt, black pants, and black slip-on
Yeah, you've got a
shoes.
nice monochrome thing, black frame glasses.
And
as
black frame glasses, and a little bit of a silver necklace.
well. Yeah, you
here.
got a silver necklace and your wedding ring
And a watch.
With a black face.
I always wear a watch.
Yeah, well, it's.
Even though I never use it, I always look at my phone to see what time it is, but I always wear a watch.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, in terms of accessories, nothing defines capability and elegance more than a.
I agree.
I
I think
nice watch.
a guy can really define style by his watch.
So now to the who. Who
The
makes all this stuff?
All right. So the glasses are Krewe, Krewe, CFDA member, Sterling, who was a CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund winner. The shirt and the pants are also CFDA member, a guy named Ben Stubbington, who is the menswear designer for Lululemon, which I think he does a great job in that kind of
I
casual.
like the hidden placket on
Hidden
the shirt.
pocket and kind of like a little button down collar.
Mm-hmm.
Shoes are, can you guess?
Are those common projects?
They are greats. It's the original Nick Wooster great. I know he's got a new leopard
Shout out to
print.
Ryan.
Yeah,
And Nick.
Yeah, I love greats. I think what Ryan has done at greats is awesome. Necklace, Jordan Askill.
Nice.
So.
And a question which you may not be able to, even you may not be able to
Yeah.
answer, the when question. Do you have any idea what season these items are from?
I think everything I'm wearing is probably seasonless, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that these greats have been forever.
Right.
This shirt is probably last year. I don't think you can get this shirt anymore. And the pants are currently in the store now.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to develop a lot of anecdotal evidence about the irrelevance of seasonality in a lot of fashion. And I think you answered the why as you described your process for getting dressed this morning.
Yeah.
Well, so, our deceased friend, Glenn O'Brien, once said, style is a visible manifestation of personality. So for you, somewhat ethereal question, but what is the difference between fashion and style?
Well, that's a question that I've been asked before, and even like in conversation, say you meet somebody at a party that you don't know, and they find out what I do, that I work at CFDA and I work in fashion. They're often like, well, how do I look? Do I look okay? Is this fine? Or I don't know. Like people want validation, right? And I always say that style is not about what this is probably what everybody tells you when you ask them this question, if you've asked other people this question, but it's true. Style isn't about what you're wearing. It's about the confidence in what you're wearing or how you feel by wearing that item. Style is really an expression of yourself. And if you put something on and you question it and you feel uncomfortable in it, then you probably don't have style, right? You should probably go back home and put something on that gives you that boost, right? To me, that's style, right? And some people are just incredibly stylish. Nick is an incredibly stylish guy. Like another talented designer who is a CFDA Vogue Fashion Fund finalist and presented this morning, and I was just obsessed with the way he was dressed, was Kirby from Pyre Moss. These Ricoh shoes on. He had his own pants on. He just really just always got it together.
And
right?
owns it.
And owns it. And it's about owning it. Yeah. And that's the confidence. And, fashion is my definition of fashion, and it might be because of my role in American fashion, is a business. That's the reason you become a fashion designer might be because you love fashion, or you grew up around someone, your grandmother who sewed, and you sat at her footsteps, or whatever your kind of emotional pipeline into the industry was. ultimately, if you decide to work in fashion or be a fashion designer, you're actually working in business. And it's important, I think, that designers approach fashion as a business. I guess a consumer, if style is about owning it, what is that? What does fashion mean? It's whatever you think is cool and whatever you think is interesting.
Well, I think amongst designers, particularly in the luxury segment, there's a bit of a stigma around a designer being commercial. How do you feel about that, given your statement on what you think fashion is?
Yeah, well, I just did a interview. I shouldn't be plugging another interview I did, right? I just did an interview with models.com. I am not a model, but they do these industry interviews, and he asked me that question, but he asked it a little bit different. He says, well, Europeans will say American fashion is too commercial. What's your response to that? And I'll give you my response that I gave him. I was like, yeah, so what? Like, isn't that the intent of it, is
Right.
to have commercial, to sell something? If the approach to fashion is art, creating something that you have no intention or strategy on selling, well, then that's art. Put that on exhibit, sell tickets, let people come in, look at it, and that's it, right? Commerce is an important part of it. And what that doesn't mean, it lacks creativity or originality or innovation. You can still be creative and innovative and be commercial. So we're Americans. You'd sell me this coffee cup that says HBA if I wanted it and asked for it. That's just the way we operate. Diane and I were once in Paris for our Americans in Paris, and we were walking past a shop, and we went in the shop. There's this French woman. She was so French, and she had these beautiful display racks made out of metal. They were very unique, and I don't speak French, but they're speaking French. And then afterwards, Diane told me, Diane said to the woman, she said, where did you get those? Where could I get them? She said, my husband made them for the shop. And Diane said, well, I would love for him to make me some, and would you sell them? And she said, oh no, we could never sell them. So it's really about that American entrepreneur. American would have sold you every one of them, right. And they would have been like, get your pickup truck and come get them in by end of day, right? So it's that entrepreneurial spirit that I think has been really driven and been an important part of American fashion.
Well, and even with basics, which one can look at as pretty commoditized, right, and not a high level of design quotient in certain garments, there's a story creation that designers have to go through as well to distinguish themselves and distinguish their trademarks. And so there's certainly a great degree of creativity in that process, and one that is just as important, really, as the design of the garments themselves. Not necessarily a question, but if you have a
yeah, no,
reaction.
I agree with that. We again, at this event we do in Paris, which is called Americans in Paris, we take 10 young designers to Paris Fashion Week, and we take a 3-day space and create this showroom to expose them to some international press and buyers that might not be coming to New York. And every year it's sponsored by different industry friends. And this past season it was sponsored by Only the Brave, Diesel, which is Renzo Russo's company. And he was speaking to the designers, and he's been in business 40 years. Owns Margiela, Victor and Rolf. John Galliano works for him and at Margiela, and he's pretty much an iconic legend that young designers worship. And these young guys got to meet him, and he was sharing his wisdom. And somebody was asking him about his opinion on the business today, and he said, when I started 30 years ago or 40 years ago or decades ago when he started, the focus was always the product, the merchandise. If you didn't have that right from the very beginning, you failed. And then he said, today, It's changed. And he reached into his pocket and he pulled out his cell phone and he said, this is the focus. If you don't have the content and the story to tell your message, you'll fail. And he wasn't saying that product and the merchandise wasn't important anymore. He was saying that you need to worry about the content and the creation and how you brand and market yourself immediately if you're going to have success. So it was very interesting to see a guy who had so many years in business, but also someone so insightful that he could change his vision to something that was relevant today.
It reminds me of something Robbie Geller said. We were on a panel that Joe's Black Book put on. And he pointed to his phone and said, I find myself, like I never thought when I graduated design school that I would be designing for a phone.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the actual elements of the garment and how they would be shot and look on a phone, which is very relevant to them. Apparel production is a dirty business, literally. It is a wasteful business by and large, and there are a lot of reports on this. What is the CFDA doing in connection with its membership to look at that and either expose it or actually implement changes that have an impact?
A lot. We have sustainability as one of our core pillars of our work. And I would say that in recent years, the last 2 years, the members have been more interested in that pillar. And so we've strengthened our focus around that. Years ago, maybe 10 years ago, we did some stuff with NRDC on a program called Clean by Design, taking some research that they did, which really was about production in China, issues like water use, dyes, and there was 10-step process to really shift production so it was cleaner. And when we presented that, it wasn't really, not that it wasn't well received, but everyone was interested. And so most of our work after that had been in the emerging space, particularly around the partnership that we have with Lexus. It's called the CFDA Lexus Fashion Initiative. So each year we pick 5 brands through an application process that go through a series of workshops, business development programs, and are eligible for micro funding to support sustainable business practices. This year, Studio 189, Rosario Dawson's line, just won $90,000 based on her sustainable business model. So we've been doing that, and Lexus has been a champion from the start. But interestingly, members who are 100 million, 150 million, 250 million are starting to come to us and say, we want to try to figure this out. The reason we were having success or have success with the small brands is because the structure of those companies is nimble and more flexible. So they're more able to create change or create new program. Those bigger guys are so entrenched in the culture and the way they're doing business, it's hard for them to get out of their own way. Yeah. But now they're starting to see the importance of it, and they're also seeing that the consumer cares about it, and that's starting to resonate. So privately, we've been doing some consultancy with 5 big brands where we actually send someone in, an expert, does a diagnostic of that business, creates a blueprint with that brand on how to actually take some actionable steps. And then that is a strategy report for that brand. The work itself is on the brand. And just this morning, I reviewed something I'm really super proud about. Is a very, very comprehensive sustainable fashion sustainability database and information center that has everything to do with power, energy, material. Material's a big, big part of it. People, there are like 19 tabs in this resource directory that will go live on CFDA.com in the fall. And that is not just available to CFDA members, but that will be available to anyone.
Excellent.
So it's quite comprehensive and incredibly impressive. So between the consultancy we were doing with the big brands, the CFDA Lexus Fashion Initiative that has touched many brands, and now this resource director, I think we're taking that pillar very responsible.
So at the most recent CFDA Awards, which was great, Kim Kardashian was honored as Influencer of the Year. Her impact on the fashion industry is beyond dispute, and I think her ability to connect with women of different body types is telling and important. But perhaps speak to how brands have had to deal with the phenomenon of influencers, and if you think it's good or bad for the industry.
I think it's good. I think any time a brand can promote product or sell product in a way that reaches a lot of people is great. I think she have 112 million Instagram followers. She got an award. You know this. Last year in 2017, we broadcast the CFDA Awards in our red carpet arrival on our Facebook page through Facebook Live. And we got some marketing assets from Facebook for free that we used. And we kind of let's put it there. We didn't really know what we were doing. And we had roughly 100 million views. And I was pretty happy with that for our first time Facebook Live. This year, we worked with a digital marketing agency pro bono to be more strategic in these marketing assets that we got. So that was super helpful. And Kim, who got an award, actually posted through her social channels that she's getting the award and watch it on Facebook Live, CFDA's Facebook Live. And we had just under 4 million viewers. So we went from 100,000 to just under 4 million. Now, the marketing people are genius and brilliant, and we'll do more stuff with them. But Kim's post clearly drove that attention.
Seismic.
It's just incredible. And look, we often are hard on things that are about change. And influencers changed the way the industry did business. I remember years ago when blogging was the influencer just started, and bloggers were starting to get front row seats at fashion shows. We decided, well, we should include bloggers in the voting for the CFDA Awards. As you know, you have to be industry people. You yourself are a voter. And there were board members that were outraged that we would even consider bloggers. And now they look at the influence they have. So I just think it's important. I think you have to align with the right influencer. It has to feel authentic. It has to feel like there's a relationship. And you have to own it and not make excuses for it if that's something that you think is right for your brand.
Yeah, and from a legal perspective, disclose it.
Yeah, disclosure. Yeah.
Well, Steven, awesome chat, and that's a wrap. Thanks for coming in and sharing your thoughts. For your efforts, here's a copy of the Laws of Style. I know you probably already have one. But
well, I have an autographed copy. Thank you.
And don't forget to follow my Twitter feed and Instagram feed on Hand of the Law. Any plugs you want before we sign off here?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram, Steven Kolb, on Twitter too. But most importantly, you should follow my dog, Donna, official Donna the dog on Instagram.
Indeed.
Chihuahua Terrier Rescue.
It's a great account. Thanks, everybody.
All right, bye.
You've been listening to The Laws of Style with Douglas Hand. For more information, go to our website at www.hballp.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Hand of the Law. Thank you for tuning in, and stay stylish.